T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Launch Sequence Podcast. We're going to be talking Star Citizen this week. You guessed it. And I've got my friend in here, actually a part of Team Tomato, helps us do some of our archiving for the videos, LiefX. And you come from a different group than most of our normal guests here. So why don't you give people a little introduction on yourself, and then we're going to get into talking about the... Gosh, I don't even know how to phrase it. Is Star Citizen taking the sim out of space sim? It's not that deep, but it's going to be a good conversation.
It's funny because like we don't want to. I'll answer who I am in a second, but we're so hesitant to ask the question: is there casualization in the game? Because we maybe don't believe it, but I think the question needs to be asked. We're so afraid to ask it though.
I mean, there's plenty of people shouting it, so might as well talk about it a little.
It's such a word that we're afraid of. But yeah, anyways, I'm Lief or LiefX, whatever you want to call me. Hello, I've worked in my current background really is the esports background. I come from Rocket League Championship Series, the RLCS. I am a host, commentator, interviewer. I've done every single role in that. At this point, I've worked on television shows, the variety gaming shows here and there. So for the past 8 years, that's been what I've been doing. And I've been on and off making my own YouTube content, streaming and that, but that's like my main kind of, I guess, background and expertise, as you would say. I don't know. I wouldn't call me an expert in anything really, but fake it till you make it, I suppose.
I would assume you know Rocket League pretty well if you.
I guess I do know Rocket League. Yeah.
Tournaments. Yeah. That's pretty cool. What would you say you kind of try and target when it comes to Star Citizen? And that's both content and gameplay.
That's a good question. Just before we went live here, I was having that dilemma, that existential crisis of what is my audience? What am I doing? My thing was I have a few different types of content I love making. I've loved when I first started, I did everything. I was making gameplay videos of me and my buddy Doyle just having fun and being silly in the game. Then I was also making machinimas. Those take a lot. That takes a lot of time, though. That is not something I can do now. Anyone that's still doing Star Citizen machinima or machinima in general, watch their stuff and watch it multiple times to give them the views, because the amount of hours that go into making content like that is very crazy. Then I was also doing, I started doing like documentaries on things in the world, and then I started realizing how much I loved immersing myself. So we did some role play. I really loved the world that Star Citizen was presenting in front of me. And then as I did more and more and used more and more of the content up in the game, I started talking about the design philosophy of it. And that's, I think, where I really found my stride of something I cared about. I don't know if other people care about it, but talking about the design philosophy of video games or at least in Star Citizen, and how CIG approaches their game development started making me open my eyes to other games and their development. And it in a way made me more interested in other games too, seeing how developers approached bringing you into the world. How, and I know the word is overused, but how much immersion can you get from a player? How much can you bring them into that game in a way that doesn't feel artificial? There's so many games now that are, sorry, I'm going on a rant here, but there's so many games that are built around cheap dopamine release. The mobile game situation where it's like, it's 5 minutes before this thing's unlocked, or you could spend some money on it. Okay, now you unlock that. You have to get 20 other gems and 5 other currencies. And I'm seeing a lot of that game design work its way into AAA titles nowadays. And it's starting to worry. It was worrying me about stuff. And I found that Star Citizen always did things non-artificially. The way that they immerse you and ground you in the world is through smaller design decisions that we'll get into a bit later. I think of, read this sign to find out where you're going. And that forces you to look at the high detail that they put into. Therefore, you're spending more time in the game. Therefore, you're more immersed. So yeah, that's kind of the direction I started going with content, is like, what are the developers doing and the decisions that they're making to make me feel invested in this product.
It's funny you say that about the mobile timer and the stuff like that, because you look at you look at the ideas of insurance, of how ships get rebuilt when you blow them up, and I do wonder if that will ever end up being a thing that they kind of use as a little bit of a gamification or a method of gating more gameplay or even monetization. The possibility of that moving more towards games that are kind of mobile game style of monetization and stuff is always something that I do worry about a little bit. You know, it's like back of the head sort of thing, and I wonder in what direction we go in. But there are a lot of timers. There are a lot of things that take time in this game, and one of those things is earning ships, which you can pay money to get around. That's fact. We all acknowledge that. And that changes the balance of the game a little bit. Doesn't make it some completely different type of game, but it definitely changes some of the balance. And if they were to bring that into other aspects, I think I would be equally as concerned with it as it sounds like you would, considering how you view those games.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've all had the discussion around pay to win probably a million times when it comes to Star Citizen. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a very strong and rich knowledge of the history of this game and what they've said. But from my understanding is that on a release, ship sales is something they would want to get rid of, and their money would come through selling limited amounts of UEC afterwards, or maybe subscriptions for cosmetics. And if that's the case, I'm fine with that, because realistically, if you talk about being able to buy a ship, both you and I go into the game right now, fresh starter packages. I've got an Aurora and you've got an Aurora, and we say, let's go battle. In 5 days, we're going to fight. We're going to 1v1 each other. And I try to work my way towards, a Hornet. And I just can't quite get there because it just takes a little bit longer to get enough currency. You go and buy it. Now we get into a battle and you win. That was pay to win. You paid to win in this scenario. You can get there quicker. Now, and one bigger thing that brings it into it is the wipes, right? If you buy a prospector, sure, you're not going to win in a fight, a battle, but you can earn currency a lot faster than me that just had all my ships and everything wiped. Because I have to work back towards that prospector to work towards more currency, to work towards a fighter that we can fight. And right now, I don't really care though that's the situation, because it's an alpha. We're just here to test stuff. And if someone buying a ship lets them test that gameplay loop that it works in faster, go for it. The game needs development. We need to get it somewhere. This is such a unique experience. I just wouldn't want to see that happening afterwards. So it's a very tricky balance that they have to manage when it comes to pay to win, because there are going to be these people now that have all of these ships, but then you throw in stuff like engineering and all that it won't really matter if they don't have friends to play with, if they bought 4,000 ships for their hangar, right?
There's, I think, and I've called a prayer in the background. This is actually, we are almost done with our move here. This will be the last podcast episode from this building, but the next one that we're in, unfortunately, it won't actually be the place we're supposed to be living right now. Long story.
Chaos.
You'll hear this same thing, but quieter. Anyways, there will always be pay to get ahead aspects in this game. There's like a bullet that you have to bite with everything that needs funding, right? Some things it's ads, some things it's over messaging for deals and sales. Some things it's some crappy monetization. Like you pick your poison. There are some situations where that poison's pretty nice. It's not that bad, The relationship we used to have with the AAA industry was great. Back before the horse armor, man. Back when you could just get a disc from the store, put it in, and the game would run. Ooh, baby, that was good times. But now, things are taking a lot more money to make, and a lot of companies want more money. Yeah. And I think there are going to be ship sales after this game is 1.0. What is being sold is where I'm like, what are we gonna see? All ships under $100, cool. Sell them with game packages, let it happen. Keep all that big stuff in some other separate area, whatever. Maybe some timed sales every once in a while. But I think that we all do need to be prepared for the fact that like this company's huge. It's over 1,000 employees. They're trying to make a big freaking game. People are still holding them accountable to 100 systems. I think that they don't need to do that given the way the game changed since then.
That can come
but
over
if they,
time, though. That's not a 1.0.
sure, but
Right.
but if they ever want to be able to do that, they got to be able to hire and maintain a high employee count, and for that they got to make a lot of money. So like, I'm not looking forward to how that works, but I'm interested in seeing what they decide to do.
Yeah.
But I think that I just thought that was interesting because you had mentioned the countdowns and the timers and things, and I can see how that could slide in.
Yeah, I think the difference though is like with the countdowns and timers that we see is it, for some reason my brain didn't go to, oh, this is going to be buy insurance credits to bring down your insurance claim time. I mean, you could buy better insurance, but that's all with EUC or in the game, right?
Yeah.
And so that to me is not really like the mobilization, like the mobile gamification of it all. That is to me just that realistic. It feels like it has a real explanation for existing in the game. I mean, first off, you would have insurance, right? You would have those timers. It's a realistic thing. Your ship needs to be delivered to that hangar, right? So to me, it makes sense, and it's not like realism for the sake of realism. It's not fun. It once you add in a lot of the other gameplay elements, especially with upcoming freight elevators and your persistent hangars, is you're going to have stuff to do. I mean, people always talk to me when I show them the game. They're like, man, this quantum takes forever. I'm like, yeah, but two things. Remember, one, at any point, we're in real space right now. Someone could interdict us and pull us out of space. Now we're in a space battle. That's exciting. That knowledge that could happen, and especially if we can get server mesh going and there's more players on the server, that's more likely that those piracy things are going to happen. Also, you're going to, I mean, if they still plan on it, have to poop and pee, you're going to have to eat. You're going to be taking those moments in quantum to make sure your ship is in the proper setup for engineering. And I think these long wait times right now, again, I don't see them as being there to make you feel like you need to spend money to bring them down. They're there because there's missing pieces of the game right now. So I never was like concerned about those things existing because they're going to go the mobile game route.
I don't think anybody is until it happens.
Yeah,
they make sense
fair.
being there.
And I guess that's the point of the talk today, is the potential of that happening.
Yeah, and that's going in a different direction. We didn't really want to talk about monetization. We want to talk about the idea of Star Citizen as a space sim. And this is an interesting angle because it's used quite a bit when it comes to the marketing, but it's not really clearly defined throughout all that marketing. You know, you hear this stuff about being the best damn space sim, and Star Citizen is a space sim. And when people ask, what's a space sim in development? You get a list, and sometimes Star Citizen is on it. But actually naming what that means for the game is a pretty important thing for a lot of people who are looking at every little feature and seeing what's getting put where and how is this working, and is that actually a sim or is it arcadey? Is it realistic? Is it not? Does it need to be realistic? So let's start out this talk by saying, in your opinion, what is a space sim?
Okay, well, when I'm thinking space sim, I'm thinking how the fights happen in the expanse. Like I'm thinking, because in my opinion, Star Citizen is one of the farthest games from a space sim, which is why the whole marketing discussion is a whole other thing. A space sim is the most, if I go into space, what's going to happen? I expect the gameplay to be very unexciting in a lot of regards. The excitement will come from the sheer danger of being in space. Because space in itself is its own character, right? It's its own bad guy. It takes forever to get where you need to go. It's dangerous. There could be space debris that flies through my ship and takes me out. Now I got to patch up a hole. Fights will be long range. You're going to be shooting missiles and bullets at each other from planet to planet, and you're going to see that. You'll have radar to track that. That's a space sim to me. The ship needs to move in pure Newtonian ways. That's what I would expect out of a space sim. That's not what Star Citizen is. So that's my definition of a space sim.
So does it need to be strictly realistic? Does it have to be based on real life?
Star Citizen or a sim?
A space sim.
A space sim, I would say the goal of a sim is to represent real life as much as possible. You will never, ever be able to, unless you're making the Matrix, you're not going to be able to make a perfect space sim. But I guess, in my opinion, as a developer, when you attach sim to it, your goal is to get as close as possible with the resources that you have. Because obviously, the more in depth you get, the larger a team you get, the more resources you're burning through. Just get as close as possible and make sure that the things that you do at least want to make sim like, that you're at least focusing on those features first. I mean, you look at like Kerbal Space, right? Like, it's their goal was to do one thing as realistically as possible. They don't have all the other sim things that real life would have, but they focused on one specific loop of that sim experience. So yeah, the developer, I think a developer's responsibility calling it a sim would be to focus on that. If that's what you're simulating, and if it's not what you're simulating, then you need to make that very clear what it is you're trying to simulate.
So that's kind of what I was getting at, and I don't know how common of a view this is. This is actually probably something I'll pose to our audio listeners. We can have a question on Spotify. You guys can check that out and give us the answer of what you think a space sim is. But when I think of a simulation, I'm thinking it doesn't have to be realistic. It just has to lay out the rule book and always stick to it.
That's fair.
So, because like if you look at our game and you say, is the fact that it has a tractor beam in it, does that make it less simulation?
Right. No, and I think this is the same philosophy that I bring when I watch television shows. I read a book, or again, play a game. The author and the creators, the developers, whoever it is that is setting the rules ahead of time, need to set those rules and abide by those rules. And they can't cheap out on it later. Had some sort of, ex machina come in and save the day. You need to live by the constraints you've given yourself. And you're right, that comes from clearly defining the set of rules ahead of time. And when you change those, that's when people can get upset, because the definition of what they're expecting is going to be out the window, and they're going to be upset with that. Now, the problem with a game like this is I feel like there's a lot of times where those rules haven't been set, and or they have been set, but they've been set in ways that it was an SCL from 6 years ago that nobody else has watched in the recent times, and you don't know. Oh, wait, that was the rule set. I thought, based off this video they just put out, that was the rule set. So you might create your own expectations of what this game is supposed to be, without understanding that no, there was a bigger picture they were trying to get to. And that's where you can see some of the confusion of these different audiences, and Star Citizen specifically, getting in and saying, I expected this, and these guys saying, I expected this. And they're very different things. And that's where the discussion of, where's the game going right now comes from, because we didn't have that laid out.
Yeah, it is. There is definitely a lot lost to this game because there's just so much to know and there's no way to know it. Like, there's a lot of different types of gameplay that you can completely miss in this. There are people who are like, I've been playing this game for 3 years, and that tip that you had mentioned in that video, I had no idea. And it's like, we're getting better with that. Definitely now they've got the control hints on the right side. It's actually kind of crazy to think that we didn't have control hints before, because they're very useful.
Can I tell you, I bought the Talon Shrike, and I'm like, I want to just yeet missiles at people, right? Like, this is gonna be great. I love that long range. I don't want to get up close and dirty. Let me just throw stuff at you. And I got it, and I started using it. I'm like, this thing is useless. I hate this. And most of that came from the fact that until about a month ago, I didn't realize that you could shoot multiple missiles at once.
Oh.
Until I saw the Firebird, I'm like, wait, how are they doing that? That's what the heck? Why can't my Talon Shrike do that? And someone in my chat said, can. Not that many missiles at once, but it can. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, you have to press G. What? How did I not know this? Yeah, I didn't. I was so stupid. I felt so
Yeah.
stupid. I've been playing this game for years. I didn't know you could shoot multiple missiles. So I just wanted to give you an anecdote to, yeah, there's so many things in the game you could just miss.
Yeah. And that goes back to like the fact that they make rules for this game. And this is where I think that they do still, and we'll get to this all throughout this conversation, but I do still think they're heading that space sim direction. Maybe not the most intensive sort of hardcore sim that you could think of, but I feel like they are trying to set rules, you know, with things like the engineering system, with things like the reputation system, with tools that we see such as the tractor beam or the charge and drain system that they're coming up with. These are features that I feel like they are setting out to make the rule book so that we can experiment with them and figure out how can we bend those rules to do stuff that we want to do. And we'll talk about like 323.2 today with the freight elevators and the cargo system. That's a big part of that too.
I think the question I think that maybe creeps up in the back of your mind, the back of my mind, the back of everyone's mind that loves the project is are these rules coming in too late? Are they? Because there's a few ways that these rules could have gone. So, you know, say 5 years ago, a developer mentioned we want tractor beams, and that's it. How that tractor beam gets implemented is now just up for conjecture. It's up for, you know, you can have a talk about it. I can have a thought on it. How do they actually get implemented into the game? And because there isn't a large definitive, now this is how it works, because they don't know. They're still making it as they go. And maybe that design document changes because of the way other systems turns out, oh, we have to actually build this way. That wasn't fun. And if we had built the tractor beam that way, it wouldn't have worked. So now that we know what that is, now we can make the tractor beam. So in that time that they mentioned tractor to its implementation, someone has that opportunity to come up with their own expectations of what that gameplay is going to look like. And that can be problematic. Maybe their expectations line up with the way it actually gets implemented. Maybe it doesn't. And then that's where you get the question of someone saying, oh, this gameplay is casualized. I mean, this isn't Star Citizen anymore. It's Beam Citizen, right? Like this, why is everything beams now? I didn't think it would be that. And because their expectations had grown in a completely other way, because that rule set that design document wasn't laid out early. And I think we're seeing that in a few other areas. I know specifically for me, one of the issues I really have with the game is hit marker. I genuinely think the red X, knowing when I've killed someone, I hate that because it takes away from the element of, did I kill someone? I need to confirm my kill, because to me as a player, that's very immersive. But maybe they always planned to do that. Maybe they didn't always plan to do that. But I didn't know that. So I built my own expectation around what that gameplay should look like. So when it comes
that's
out,
a big one.
I asked the question, are they casualizing it? But maybe they always planned to do that. They just didn't tell me, or I didn't look into it. Right.
That is, dude, that's such a crux of commentary surrounding the game. Just the idea that people will see something get developed for this game, and I can't fathom how you come to this conclusion, but they think that it's something that was just thought up right there and created on the spot and put into the game. And people are like, if they just stopped adding the features, then the game would be complete. And I'm like, what do you think the features are trying to do? This is like, people are holding these people accountable for things they said 10 years ago. How are you going to just tell them to not do those things they said they were going to do and launch an incomplete game instead? That's the whole reason to get away from that. And things get muddy because it's almost impossible to keep track of all the things that were said over 10 years. And that's part of maybe why people think it's, you know, just like forget about all of that and give us a feature list and go for that, which they're working on. But it's so easy to think that something is getting added or something has been finished and not know where it's going to go all the way until even myself or somebody who's making videos about this game, we don't actually know how far these things are going to go. So you can say, well, it's just an alpha. Oh, it's just V1. But I understand that people don't have this information right in front of them, so they can't know that maybe this is something that was planned this whole time. People are losing it about these cargo changes. Other
Right.
people, some people are losing it because they're saying this game is being made too complex. Why are they doing this? Other people are like, yo, I was praying to get this done before I had my first child. That kid's in college now. Yeah, it's happening. And it's like, probably one of the biggest issues with a game that takes this long to develop and
Yeah.
is so open about it.
I think the just to kind of like we'll reiterate on this a bit more when we talk about why we think if we think it's or is or isn't getting casualized. But my outcome, spoiler alert, is that I don't think it is, because the foundation that they've built already is to the game design philosophy that I expect from them, right? The rule set they've at least set for the game and the principles around it of deep gameplay loops, making sure they're skill-based gameplay loops. You're not specking points into something. As long as they maintain those smaller things that weren't to my expectations aren't as big a story. It's if they change the foundation of the game that I think players like myself, probably yourself too, that will have problems with it, because now I don't want another call. I don't want a Call of Duty, right? Like I don't want this to be actually, let's scrap the persistent universe. We're just doing Arena Commander now. That's
Oh
Star
my
Citizen,
God.
right? Like that would be something that I would have a problem with. It's just Theaters of War. Shout out Theaters of War. It's just Theater of War. That's all the game is now. I would have problems with that. I think you would have problems with that. I think every single person would have problems with that. But as long as they don't do that, the smaller things here and there, I can let pass, knowing that they still know the direction they want to go. I mean, I don't think Chris Roberts ever lost his way in what he wanted from the game. I always just worry that as they get more players playing it, voicing their opinions on stuff, because they do take, and that's one of the cool things about it, they do take the community's opinions on stuff into consideration, that I worry that there'd be too much of that CIG realizes, this is a majority of our player base now. We have to listen to them, add hit markers, because a lot of these players aren't good. And that's where concern can come from. It's a tipping point for a developer like CIG to give in to that sudden influx of larger player base that might not be the core audience that you were targeting in the first place, that you might be tempted into just catering to in the future.
Yeah. This is almost, I think, leaving the idea of space sim as like I said, I just think of a space sim as being something that is defined by a set of rules that allows you to experiment with those rules set in space. But this conversation starts to go a little bit beyond that. It goes more towards a conversation of, is this game becoming casual, or maybe too honestly, you have to define what people mean by casual. It's hard to have that conversation because everybody's got different arguments, but you see things like sprinting, sliding, FPS scanning, glint, scope glint, master modes, what you just said with the hit markers. These are the things that people will look at and generally categorize as being more arcadey. I don't know what exactly it is that makes people react to them that way, but with those things coming more and more into the game, obviously there's a reaction to it. And you said you don't know if they've planned it this whole time, right? But with the way that they're being brought into the game, and you can take any example from this list of stuff, we could just kind of start talking about these topics.
Okay.
Do they feel like they don't fit in the game that's been built around them?
Some of them. Not all of them, but some of them. And maybe that's their point. Maybe their goal is to just take these features that they've developed for the single player game. The single player game can be as casual as it wants. It's a narrative-based game. Squadron 42 does not have to be what Star Citizen, the persistent universe, is, in my opinion. That is a narrative experience. And as long as the gameplay's fun in between those narrative points, I'm cool with it. Let me just have fun with it. But Star Citizen, I think they're taking those features, saying, let's yeet them in there, see how they work, and maybe they'll backtrack on some of them and say, this actually didn't work out the way we thought it would. The player base, the way it mixes with this gameplay system doesn't work. Maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe it's not. For instance, one of the ones I'm not a fan of, glint. I don't like that. If the light happens to shine across it, Sure. But a sniper holding out for maybe a sniper's out there for 3 hours waiting for his target. Maybe he's on a reconnaissance mission and to take down another org player's boss who they got intel from the real world because someone was in someone else's group DMs, found out they're going to be in this area and they can now sabotage them. That's the level of immersion I would love, right? That's really bringing people into the game. When it becomes almost an ARG, right? Like this is just the blurring the lines between real life and in the game. It's the whole idea of spectrum is like, if they can implement that into the game, now we have a system that you can always communicate with your friends in the game, even when you're just on your phone and out going, blur those lines. But for that player, if you're sitting out there for 3 hours on this reconnaissance mission or this the sabotage mission, and the whole time everyone in the base is laughing at you because they're like, look at this guy. He's been sitting out there trying to snipe us for 3 hours. We can see him. That takes away from the immersion level for me, right? Like this, what is the point of the glint? I just don't see why that fits in, why that needs to be there, except for the point that the player on the receiving end has a chance now to fight back. And that to me is very fair, right? It's giving a player that maybe didn't prepare in that situation an equal footing in that battle. And that to me isn't fair to the person that just put in all that prep work to do that espionage mission. And to me, that detracts from the you have to plan what you're doing philosophy that they've mentioned plenty of times. They want you prepare for your missions. And if I could just suddenly see the guy that's out in the forest that spent hours getting their gear together for this mission, and I just happen to there's a glint. Hi, boom. Oh, I also know when you're dead because I have a red X that tells me when you're dead. I don't have to go out there and check, not knowing if there's other people that could ambush me. I can just stay cozy in my base. That does take away from the core design that I at least feel I've been told the game is about.
I've definitely heard a lot of takes like that about the hit markers. I like the hit markers because they make the FPS experience feel more tactile, right? It gives like the sound and the visual are satisfying,
right?
But I fully get what you're saying about the idea that you've planned, you've done this stuff, you take that person down, and the game is taking a step away from you, confirming that. They have tools for that too. FPS scanning is something that can come in and allow you to scan that body at the very least from a distance and still require you to confirm that kill, which is a little bit more Star Citizen, what I would say I've understood it as.
But the thing is with the scanning is that is something that can be resource intensive. There's a cost for the benefit, right?
And it's linked to your equipment.
What's the cost? What is the cost for you as a player to know that there's a sniper out there?
What about if the sniper was an NPC?
I mean, that's a good question because obviously you want the players to feel that they're not worse off, the NPCs, or do you? I mean, part of the whole push of these NPCs is that they're going to be brutal when you're fighting them. They're going to ambush you as soon as the server can handle their calculations. But the idea is that it's not going to be easy. And I guess maybe for NPCs you offer a glint every 5 minutes or something. Or again, I don't know. I personally, as a player, and I could be swayed otherwise if someone disagrees with this, but I personally, as a player, wouldn't mind if I was not being careful and I got taken up by an NPC or something in the wild. It plays to the fact that if I'm out in the wild, I need to be aware. Bring friends. Call a medic now. That's just going to give medics more of a chance to have that gameplay. So I personally wouldn't care, but I can see the point that, well, again, a casual player or someone else might be very, very frustrated that they don't know why they just died.
Yeah. And these are the hard game design decisions that.
No, that was a good point.
We've been waiting for the game to become more of something we can imagine playing, but we've always talked about the larger scale things, jump points and different systems, the economy and outposts and cities and all this stuff. But these are the small little details that don't come up until they start actually building this stuff, putting it into practice. And it's good that we're talking about it. But it is a conversation, and I think it was said best here in chat. It's about how hardcore do you want it to be. And I said earlier, it's hard to define what people mean by arcadey, but you've got the hardcore side, quote unquote, and you've got the arcadey side. And I think the idea of being a space sim sits outside of that scale. Maybe it's another axis, but I think you can play around with that, and it feels like that's what they're doing on a case by case basis with each of these features, as we'll get to with the freight stuff in a little bit. But you mentioned medical gameplay also. We are seeing a change of sort of hinting at the idea that they're going to make it easier to respawn, but also kind of trying to reassure us that they're still building in consequences for death and being careless and stuff. This is another place where people are kind of feeling like it might be getting more arcadey. Are they moving away from Death of a Spaceman and this kind of permadeath system? Do you have any feelings about that?
I think right now is a temporary middle ground, right? I mean, for now, and this is one of those points of like, oh, is there casualization of, are they testing? Have they gotten a large amount of feedback from new players that dying sucks? Because realistically, in Star Citizen, dying does suck. It takes forever to get back. Like, you could spend 2 hours. 1 hour is trying to get out of the main menu into the game. No, that's actually gotten better recently. But the like getting set up, getting to your objective, and then dying right away, especially as the NPCs get more brutal. And I've had bunker missions where I've been ambushed and I've been killed by NPCs because they were working. And I just spent an hour and a half to go and kill one person and die for a player that can seem very wasteful for their time, depending on what they're looking for in this experience.
Yeah.
And in being able to respond right away is definitely beneficial to that experience. It makes you feel like you want to invest more time. So this could just be a intermediate until we have the rest of the Death of a Spaceman mechanics in. Spawn as much as you want. I mean, before I made videos of me jumping and holding backspace and ragdolling in funny ways because I didn't care about dying, right? And so there was already kind of an element of death. You could respawn quick before. So I'm not super concerned about being able to respawn out of a medevac over and over and over again. The problem is on a full release, I don't want that because I want there again to be a cost. I think everything should have a decision, and it seems like CIG wants us to. Every decision you make should have a benefit and a cost, and you weigh those benefits and costs, which is again why the glint for me is against that design philosophy. But if you want to respawn 20 times over to beat this mission because that's the play style you want to play, you don't want to wait to go back to your ship, get a new ship, fly over there again, then do it. I want you to be able to do that, but I want there to be a cost, and that cost will come as Death of a Spaceman. Your arms start to fail. Next time you come around, you got a cybernetic that doesn't work as well. So you have a little more sway in your aiming or something. Whatever it is, they need to be cost. There's just no cost to that respawn right now. Yeah. So it's going to feel very casualized. As long as they keep going down the route of Death of a Spaceman and eventually add that cost, I have no problems. But we are, in my opinion, in that intermediate stage of that whole feature is not built out yet, so it feels casual.
Yeah, I'm glad they came out and specified that they were still going in that direction. I think they made a bit of a blunder putting themselves in the position that they needed to do that. The trailer they released with the vehicle, I think, did more harm to what people think of the game than the vehicle itself. Mm-hmm. And probably including some information on the vehicle page would have helped there. But I have been, for most of my time following Star Citizen, I have been strongly in the camp that less lives, right? 5 to 10 lives in and bear with me, folks. When I say life, when I say life, I mean you have been absolutely f***ed up. Like you are. This isn't like you fell out of your ship and glitched and died. You didn't. This isn't you didn't have a helmet on and you asphyxiated. Right. These are things that you can kind of recover from, or that maybe they can they can kind of cheese a recovery from. I'm talking like you got hit with an Idris railgun, okay? Your ship's quantum drive exploded while you were standing next to it. You got smashed by a tank, like things that would definitively kill someone.
You are Stardust now.
Yeah, I don't expect you to go through these lives very often, but I'm thinking like make enough lives that your average person is going through one whole major life over the course of maybe a year and a half. Now,
what does clipping through the planet count as? Is that a life?
Thank God it's not. No, we're assuming a perfect world, which we won't get, but we're assuming a game that actually works when we talk about this stuff. Now, I've been in that camp for a while. I thought that it's a good idea. It makes you really care about your life, but at the same time, dude, I am completely open to changing my opinion of that. And I can say that it sounds like a better deal to allow people to respawn more easily, and just double down on the actual consequences of it, right? Don't make them lose their life, but give them something to think about. And you said something like your aim is swaying. Like, I want to see actual stakes, something that is actually impeding how well you play for that entire little life that you had since that last regeneration. Sure, you can fix it, but that should be also difficult to do. And some people might be really annoyed hearing this, because you should just be able to die and go back to your normal life and continue on with it. But this is something that they ingrained into the inner soul of this game, the idea of death mattering. And I think that was pretty important to a lot of people. Not that it ruined your day, just that it makes you think a little bit more about the decisions you're making, and makes you make those choices. I'm going to bring the environmental armor because I'm going to this moon. I'm not taking that chance. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think again, it comes down to, I've said it a couple times now, but I'm saying it because they've said it, is cost benefit, right? The decision for everything needs to be made, and this is where I then question, like, this is how I gauge. You said, what's a sim? The rule set. That's my rule set. Every decision I make, cost benefit. What are they? Which one do I choose? And so when they implement something that doesn't have a cost and only benefit, that's where I ask the question, should that exist? Because the rule set they've given me is cost benefit. And if it's only benefit, then it's for a casual player, in my opinion. That's the word when I would use casual, is when it's outside of the rule set they've given you for the benefit of a player. It's just easy. It's easier than what they would have you believe in the first place.
Yeah. Let's talk about one more feature that people see as kind of simplifying or making the game less hardcore before we move on to 3.23.2 and the cargo discussion.
Okay.
And that would be master modes for this one. I think I'm quite tired of talking about it, to be honest, but it's a really wide-reaching one. I think a lot of people aren't as affected by this as you would think from the discussion, because most people aren't really going out, and most people probably won't be going out and doing combat nonstop once this game gets more developed. But it's still it's a hot topic, and it has absolutely put some artificial rule sets in places where we didn't expect them. So this is, I think, something I would say is taken away from the sim aspect. But is it bad? Or do you even agree?
Yeah, so I'm one of those players that, like, I actually have been doing more space combat because of master modes, because I've found it more enjoyable. I love the sensation, that clunking you hear in your ship as it switches from quantum to SEM or vice versa. There's something just aesthetically pleasing about the whole experience now. Do I think it's perfect yet? No, I definitely think they need to. And I think almost every single person has said, master modes, right direction, let's tweak it now. And I'm in that camp too. I think what it is, again, I think it's within their design philosophy. It's cost benefit. It's, all right, I want to get into the space battle. What's my cost? Okay, well, I have to spool down my ability. I lose some of my speed. Does it make sense realistically in the real world that your shields can't work when you're quantum traveling or something? I don't know. We don't have that in real life. That's not my concern. Star Citizen space battles already are so far from realistic space battles. Like, we're if this is the spectrum of realism and arcade, Star Citizen is like here in terms of space battles. It's
That's
nowhere
before
close.
Master Modes?
That's before Master Mode. It's nowhere close to real space battles. Weird Star Wars is what it's mimicking. That is not real space battles. Right? Like, that's not what it is. And that's fine though. It's fun. And that's the point. The game still has to be fun. I like that it's not shooting missiles from planet to planet, and so we need to realize that it doesn't need to be realistic. You don't need to have an exact reason. You can make up a lore reason why the shields don't work in this situation when you're quantum drive or whatever, and why you need to go slower. It's just a power issue. We don't have generators that can generate enough power to do both. There you go. There's your answer.
I wish.
So for me, yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I do think that the space sim approach to that would have been tying it into the resource management system we're seeing. The reason I don't think they did that is because of just how ridiculously complicated that would make every ship. To have to balance each ship in terms of power to make sure that you couldn't use your weapons while you were using quantum and like that's
couldn't you just add more like values like, oh, it's now consuming this much so your weapons won't work or something.
But then you're opening up the game to probably what are the biggest problems with having a space sim, and that is that you are going to let your players experiment with something very powerful in the game, right? If you have players who, you've set up this power system, yes, it balances most of the situations, but if people can't figure out how to use that system to have their quantum drive spooled and have really powerful weapons and possibly be powering their shields just because of like they have had enough time to experiment with the simulation of the game, that can start to break things and create more metas. So like I can kind of see how the more simulation you get into, especially in a game that requires so much player interaction, the more likely it is that players will figure out how to make that simulation work for them.
I guess that will always happen though. Like there's no way around.
An artificial rule is the way around, right? You can't do that now. It's impossible.
No, that's fair. I also don't mind if there's a situation where you have a ship that has 5 crew and it takes every single one of those 5 crew continued concentration to maintain that specific overpowered schematic. Engineers are running left, right, center to maintain that. I, in my opinion, don't think that's a problem because now you have skilled gameplay, right? Like these players you're going to hire these engineers, right? If they're not a part of your crew, you're going to pay them a salary of AUC to AUEC to join your crew, right? Like you're gonna want them on there, and I think at that point that's fine. You get an engineer that knows how to juice the system. That's something you would see in a sci-fi movie, right? Like this engineer knows the right amount of power to push at the right amount of time, and if they mess it up, it could blow up your quantum drivers, right? Like, have that cost there. I don't mind if they let players experiment, have that overpowered build come out, and then CIG says, all right, now that we know that you guys can experiment with it and it's possible, we're going to make it hard for you guys to do that. We'll take it away. It's the same with crime. They don't stop you from doing crime. They just make sure that there is punishment if you don't do it right.
And that's starting to get into more of the simulation part of the game that we haven't done too much justice to. Things like the economy they've talked about, but also the loss system, like you're saying, the cargo system we're about to talk about. These are things, even the medical system to some extent, while it's being simplified right now, with the way that they're working with it, with drugs and injuries, these are all things that are meant to bring a lot more depth to the gameplay. Master Modes, in my opinion, is a place where they have legitimately taken a step back from simulated gameplay. Now, like you said, we were already very far away from realism, and an addendum, I guess, to my definition of a space sim. It does need to be a little bit more complex in the way it works, even if there are rules. Like, the game, as you said, is very dogfighty, World War II style, as we've all heard mentioned. And that made it more gamey or more arcadey than something like Kerbal, maybe. But they definitely took a step back from whatever simulation there might have been in ship flight for the sake of, in that position, I think, simplifying balance. But also preparing the game for other types of gameplay. Like one of the biggest things that we see here when these changes come about, and this can go to the medical changes we're seeing too, is that they're making these changes not just for dogfighting gameplay, they're making them for capital ship gameplay. They might be making it for E-War gameplay or for towing and SRV gameplay. Like there's different branches. So ultimately, I think it's hard to say. Are they making it less sim or more sim? But I do think that, and we're about to get to this, no matter what, they are aiming to create an experience that is both complex but also fun.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think so. I think that while it's less sim in the sense of realism, by your definition of sim of setting the rules and following them, in my opinion, the rules that they've set are that the gameplay loops need to be deep and skill based, and I think allowing, again, back to the master modes, if there was a way to do both, if an engineer could figure it out, again, as long as there's that cost to it that you could screw up here if you're not paying attention, I think that does stay sim. It's not realistic, but it is complex still. And if they can find that as the balance for master modes, that'd be cool. Maybe there is a way to kind of have the best of both worlds momentarily. You know, if I'm a good enough engineer, I can juice my system to boot up my quantum drive while I'm still in SEM for, 30 seconds, but it's also going to wear and tear. But maybe it wears and tears the quantum drive because you're juicing it, and now you got to go buy a new one. It's like a one moment escape. As long as there's a cost to what you're doing and a skill input to that, I don't mind it as much. But again, I don't mind the way master modes is mostly as it is now. It's the decision of what am I doing in this moment. I have to make that decision of, am I fighting or am I running? I just got interdicted and I'm in my nav mode. Do I run or do I swap and fight? I like that there's a decision there to be made. But again, I'm also not a guy that's going to be looking for those fights. And you're right that it extends out. I mean, you get master modes for your missiles, for your tone, whatever you're mining. These are all master modes in a way, right? You're swapping your systems to put your power somewhere else. And it is looking at the larger scheme of things. But yeah, it is hard for me to give an opinion on it and be taken seriously because I don't look for space battles. So take my opinion with a grain of salt.
Now, on the flip side of things, Star Citizen 323.2 is coming out pretty close. I mean, we don't know exactly when it's happening, but by the time people are watching this podcast in the next week, maybe it'll be an Evocati. This is basically removing our powerful inventories and physicalizing everything. It's saying you got to go to a physical location to get your stuff from there. You've got to move it by hand or pay somebody else to do it for you. And if you lose it, it's going to stick around and other people will be able to find it. This is going to eventually lead to cargo weight making a difference on your ship when you're flying, your mass distribution, VTOL thrusters holding you up in atmosphere. Are you containing your cargo on the inside or outside of a ship? Tons of details going into this whole thing regarding cargo, persistent hangars, and freight elevators. This is clearly not a de-simming change to the game. So, like, why is it that some people are saying it's getting more complex and too complex in this case, in some cases, or from some people, but also people are saying it's getting too arcadey and too simple?
I mean, I think one of the reasons is again, part of it, there's two reasons. Part of it can come from the fact that they're implementing stuff into the game that doesn't have those intermediate steps yet to fill the gaps, right? It's like the same thing to quantum. When you're quantum traveling, what are you doing? You're just sitting there for a while. But eventually, you might have stuff to do. So it's the same thing with the med beds. Is like, we have this piece of it yet, but not all of these pieces of it yet. So it seems like it's casualized, but maybe once the rest of the picture is implemented, that seems arbitrary. Now, it doesn't matter anymore. But on the other side of things, you're seeing cargo's already there, and now we're getting those intermediate things, which add that complexity. So I think it's just different gameplay loops being at different stages of their life. Where are we in those stages of gameplay loops? This one feels more complicated. This one doesn't, because it's not as far along as this one. And I think that's a lot of what is actually happening. And the other reason could just be maybe CIG is shifting their focus. Instead of being here, they want to go here. And that area is really what they wanted, more complex. And the combat was something that they actually want to feel more fluid and maybe, a little more easy and simplified or more familiar to gamers. And it's just a shift in what they wanted to do. I think it's more the former. I think it's just that gameplay loops are in different stages of their lives. And cargo, while already existing, getting that intermediate step makes it feel more complicated, because that's what it was always going to be. And eventually medical gameplay will feel like that too. But right now it doesn't.
So you think that everything is headed more towards this level of complexity in the game? So while I do question a couple things, I've talked about, the red X markers, the glint. Another one I didn't like was waypoints in the tutorial pointing exactly to the terminal I needed to go to. I wanted to use the signs to find it. Those are some of the things that I feel are casualized. But when it comes to the greater world, I haven't really been convinced that CIG is giving up on that vision, right? Like I don't think CIG is really saying, yeah, you know what, let's just make everything easy. I think the intent is to be as immersive as possible while being fun. And in my opinion, persistent hangers and freight elevators is proof of that. I mean, that's the whole point, I think, of talking about this, is it's proof that they have not given up on that philosophy. And this is why while I get concerned about a couple things, I get drawn back and say, no, I think we're fine. And I do believe that they'll still aim for more complexity, as long as that complexity is fun. One of the things about persistent hangers, while initially I didn't like persistent, but it was instanced essentially. At first, I hated the word instanced, because one of the things about Star Citizen that was so good is that if you see it, other players see it. Even down to the point of, like, I can tell when you're ADSing because I can see your character looking down the scope. Those were the things that really sold me on the game. So when I hear instanced, I'm like, oh man, that's like, I can't see this. But it does move to an actual physical location that then other players will see you coming out of the spot. You're not just going to see ships appearing out of the hangars, right? Yeah. Like, you'll see the doors open, you'll see into their hangar. So I thought that was a tasteful way to balance that. So then I got to look at, okay, I'm over the instance thing, the persistent thing. That is a massive thing. I'm so excited, because one of the things that we lack in this game right now is a sense of real progress, or a sense of home. Base building, of course, is going to fix that as well. But in the intermediate, we're going to have these hangars that feel like home. Yeah. So many people in my Discord are talking about how excited they are to set up like a little shop. Well, I'm going to have these things over here. I finally get to put my trinkets that I have in in my hangar in my actual hangar now. That freaking aquarium from 8 years ago. Yeah.
And to me, it's so exciting. And yes, to answer your question in a long way, is I do think they're still going to aim for complexity. I really don't think that they gave up on that at all.
Yeah, and you can see it from engineering as well. It's there. How are you feeling about overall the cargo changes? I mean, the idea of literally having to pick up and put down everything, or again, pay somebody to do it. And I think one of the most exciting parts is that they're talking about now small outposts will have the cargo you expect. They'll have the facilities you expect. Big space stations and cities will have, more ready available stuff. Almost feels like it's leaning into the economy changes too. Overall, how are you feeling about the update and all this stuff? Are you even into cargo hauling?
So I am interested in the idea, and I've done cargo hauling. I have lots of people in my org that are into cargo hauling, and that's just all they do. For me, I find it very difficult to care about cargo hauling until there's two reasons. One, there's always the knowledge that before 1.0, there's a final wipe. So progress in the game is very difficult for me to invest in, knowing that it will all go away. For me, I view this as a test bed to try stuff, see is this fun, and part of it is having to care. So I do tell myself, no, care. This is it. There's no more wipes. Care about what you're doing, and that made me care about rep recently, which has actually made it very exciting. It kind of reinvigorated my love in the game by pretending it's never going to get wiped again. Now I care, and role playing that situation essentially. But with cargo, it's another reason it's hard for me to care is the economy is arbitrary, right? Tony Z is sleeping. We don't have quantum in the background. We don't have the quanta always running in the dynamic economy. We don't have that. And part of doing cargo for me would be feeling like I'm impacting the world around me in a realistic, dynamic way. And until we don't have that, then I can't, prices are arbitrary. They're just set because, we need something for people to work around, right? And it's fine. It needs to be that way right now. But I will really only truly care once we have that backbone. Please, you think maybe SitCon this year we'll see something? I don't know. I mean,
I think that they've got, looking at what the economy team has been saying, I think that they are actively implementing the quantum system. And whether it's called quantum or not, doesn't really matter at this point. And it is quantum. It's not quanta.
Quanta's the little guys that move around.
But they've talked about, in monthly reports, we've seen them talk about balancing all the prices, right? They're coming up with algorithms to help balance commodity pricing at the base level. They have an algorithm that they're working on for mission payouts based on distance and difficulty. They have now configured what points of interest in the game are considered sinks, producers, or transformers of resources. So they are defining the links in this economy system. I think that is a 4.x branch type of thing. We might not see it in 4.0, but I certainly think that we're headed in that direction. And the updates of pricing to ships that we saw in this past update, to these commodities that we're about to see in 323.2, and probably more update prices in 4.0, I think point towards that being a thing for sure.
Yeah. So as of now, I can't care as much, but loading stuff, I don't know why. This sounds so stupid, but sitting there and manually loading stuff onto a ship sounds so fun to me. I don't know what it is about that moment. Because I've had moments where I've gone out and done massive I think I did it once with your crew, with the garden. Shout out. We went out and just did like a massive cargo thing with the Hull C, and just did cargo, and we're just shooting stuff around.
It's fun.
And but I think part of the fun though is just seeing all these pieces, the players moving and doing their thing, and there's this synergistic just operation just feels, and having a large scale thing like that come together feels cool. And sitting in my hangar being like, hey guys, we got to hurry up, we're loading way too slow, we're gonna make no money, we've been here for an hour and a half, let's go, come on. That's fun to me. I don't know what it is. Even just when we first got the ability to use a tractor beam to put guns and pull them off of our ships, that was fun. Going out and salvaging and pulling things off a ship, that was fun. I don't know what it was, but it was immersive. I guess that's really what it is. It really let me invest myself in the world. It doesn't feel tedious to me. It feels fun. So I am very excited for this to come.
I think it's also, people are overestimating how often they'll be packing cargo boxes a lot, or how often they'll be stocking their ship. The game they're building, yes, it sucks when you die a lot or your ship blows up a lot, but you got to keep in mind that this is a game being developed for a time when players are going to be hopping in here, putting their stuff on their ship, and then flying away from that planet for days possibly, or weeks. And given the expectations of health and death of a spaceman and stuff, they don't expect you to just go out and blow your ship up in an hour. You're going to be out there for a long time. And even if you do have to store your ship or log off with your ship at a space station, you're not going and getting all of that stuff and doing it all over again. It's already there on your ship. the stuff that's in that cargo box, the food and the ammo and the life support modules and the fuses and your helmets and armor and weapons and guns and all of that is already in your ship. So when you think about who is going to be doing all of this time wasting moving cargo around, it's the cargo haulers. And even if you did end up being in a ship that maybe you need 4 SCU loaded, then pay 500 UEC and get the 4 boxes loaded in like a minute. I really think that the complexity of this is not going to hit until you really start to get more into those higher capacity missions and activities.
But realistically, that's probably what those players want at that point. I mean, if you are a dedicated trucker, the process of but weighing again that cost benefit analysis of do I have time to load it myself? Do I have time? That's part of the intrigue. That's part of the excitement. If I'm playing like some sort of like back in the day, cross country Canada, it was a trucking sim. We played on the old colorful Macintoshes. And, part of the excitement was like, how am I going to make my deadline? Do I get this much cargo loaded in because it takes this much time? Do I just skip that? That's part of the excitement, in my opinion, for someone doing trucking is those decisions. And the more you give them the chance to make those decisions, the more exciting it is.
Absolutely. That's what these game loops are all about. Somebody, in order for medics to be able to heal people and be a medic, the rest of us have to deal with injuries. So you could be unhappy that the game has injuries because you're an FPS player and you don't want to deal with injuries. But what is a medic to do if there are no injuries? What is a cargo hauler to do if there is no cargo loading mechanism? What is an FPS player to do if there are no weapon jamming and weapon maintenance and stuff? Like all these things that might annoy one part of gameplay build complexity in others where people are going to want to spend hundreds of hours playing. So I think I think it's a good idea to continue to build complexity and to take those smaller features, something like maybe reloading, which is a big part of FPS gameplay, but maybe not as important as the AI you're fighting. Something like having a mini map. These smaller things that simplify and streamline the gameplay, I think allow people to get more into the complex gameplay that's waiting for them without the controls and interface getting in their way as much. And that there's something to be said about interface there, but I think they're moving in the right direction.
I think that's a good way to look at it. A good point is that while some of these smaller things might feel like a casualization, it really is just to make sure that those new players get to the complex stuff. Because right now, unless you have a player that's experienced to guide you to those, you're going to boot the game up, you're going to get in, wander around, and you're not going to find those complex gameplay loops. Part of it being that they're not all fully implemented, but another part of it being that where do you look? How do you find that? How do you get to the good stuff? And if the first 10% of the game for you is fighting with the game because it's just unintuitive, then you're not going to ever get to those complex stuff. So maybe it is a necessary evil to have the red hit marker. Maybe it is a necessary evil to have waypoints in early missions for players. Hold their hand a little bit before you let it go. I mean, on the waypoint thing, it's like, maybe easy missions that are considered, the description says, hey, this should be a breeze, no problem. We have the location data. Here's your quest marker. Go, here's the terminal. Go do that. But you might get a mission later that then says, hey, we have no location data. You're going to have to find this yourself. And now you have like a hard mission that doesn't hold your hand. Whereas in Skyrim, there's always a quest marker pointing where no matter how hard the mission, you always know where to go. But SC then could have that chance to give you the easy stuff up front, hook you in, and then work your way towards the complex stuff, rather than, again, those gameplay or those players losing interest immediately because there is no hand-holding at the beginning.
That's a good point. There are a lot of good ways to drop the hand-holding. In chat here with the supporters, some things that are mentioned are things like being able to move around while you're ammo repacking instead of working with each bullet, which I do think is a decent halfway point between like manual ammo management, and also still being able to like, hey, don't forget, you have to, you need to manage your magazines and make sure your backpack is good. But another one that's mentioned is FPS radar. And I think it would be awesome to see not only the ability to customize what an FPS radar does based on the helmet you're having, like the dynamic crosshair, but also as the missions get more and more involved and more advanced, like you're saying, they could start to introduce enemies or vehicles that have cloaking technology, that have armors that don't react to that FPS scanning, that essentially make the feature useless anyway. So you have the choice of having the feature, but then the game itself is starting to scale based on how you can react to or use those features.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing I just said with the waypoint thing, that, hey, we don't have any of this data downloaded. Find your own way. This mission, you get another mission like, hey, we have a bounty that you can go take right now, but we've gotten word in that this guy is using some new advanced cloaking technology. So beware, your scanner might not be as useful. You're absolutely right. You can do that with the missions themselves, can then take away those handholdy things. You can make sure, what if, hey, this opponent isn't hooked up to any biometric scanners, so we don't know if you've actually killed them. Now the red X suddenly doesn't work on that. So yeah, you're right. The missions could take away those toys to make it more complex.
They can figure it out. I think that was a really cool part of the dynamic crosshair. Not only the fact that you can turn it off, and I think with some of these things that are maybe more UI based, you should be able to turn things off if you want, waypoints, minimap, crosshair, whatever. But I love that they used that as an opportunity to start specializing armor and say, you have to make an educated decision about what helmet you're using if you want to get this crosshair. Suddenly, less focus on some arbitrary skill number that you're adding to your rifle skill. Instead, you are actively going to a store or going to a crafting shop and making the helmet is going to help you with that gameplay.
And those things right there, what you just said, is exactly why I'm not afraid of CIG abandoning the vision that they set out. They'll make changes, they'll make adjustments. That's what happens. They've already done that multiple times, but they're not abandoning the overall vision, because they're still rooted in the game design philosophy of making everything diegetic, right? Like the decision you make is not where to spec the skill point. The decision you make is, what am I bringing with me? And the fact that they're continuing to make those decisions with current development means they have not abandoned that philosophy.
And that comes full loop back to the freight system, the cargo that we're talking about. You start specializing armors, weapons, the medical resource system, whatever it is that you are doing in this game, it ends up coming back around to this system of, you've got limited space, you've got physical space, it affects the way your ship flies, it affects how much stuff you can carry, and that's why it's physicalized. And one of my favorite things about what we're seeing right now is just how many of these systems we waited so long for actually coming into the game and making that difference finally. Yeah. It's nice.
It's well, I mean, there's some people that have been in it longer than me, but it already feels crazy for me. I mean, I only started playing in 2019, right? Like I bought it 2016, didn't have a PC to play in 2019. So I generally could be considered a new player. Even though it's now been 5 years.
Yeah, you want to know what's crazy? More people have joined into the game since 2019 than before.
So like from 2019 onwards, then from 20
from 2012 to 2019.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. The game's starting.
It's growing.
Yeah. And didn't they recently say they just beat out some of the recent metrics of players online?
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, May is a very good month for them, and the better the game is playing, the more the features are coming out, and the more famous people are playing the game. Generally, the more eyeballs, right, and the more people who are coming in. So I'm thinking next May will be even bigger, because at that point the game should be, if server meshing is doing okay, it should be more stable. And there's going to be a lot more gameplay. 2 systems, Squadron 42 possibly in people's minds and on the advertisement. I think next May is going to be absolutely huge. And hopefully they can get the stability figured out for that.
Yeah. I mean, part of it, again, is just the fact that they've already, I mean, even if there's tweaks to be made, the fact that the UI is already smooth, the new Moby Glass, is like, I don't feel like I'm fighting the game as much anymore. And that's a massive thing for new players when they do just try it. Sure, the one complaint I still get from people is low frame rate. That's going to be consistent for a while.
Yep.
Until there's a few things they need to fix on that. But the thing is that you're not fighting the game anymore because of these small little tweaks here and there. And that's massive for new players that I think as we continue to get more players, more and more are actually going to start staying as a result. It just, if subconsciously makes the game feel better, even if the underlying systems are the same, you know?
Like the star map's not chasing people away now in the first hour. Thank God. Now it takes 2 hours.
I didn't care if nothing else made it in 323 as long as the star map made it.
Dude, that's how I feel, man. And then after the patch came out, it's all people are like, there was nothing in this patch. Yeah, they just did the star map, whatever. I'm like, bro, whatever. We've been crying for a star map for like 4 years.
Yeah, what do you mean just the star map? That's all I care about.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand. They want missions, they want gameplay. 323 was not the content update. 4.0 probably will be, and we will be covering that over the next corner on videos in this podcast, in Citizen Central podcast, and everywhere else we can talk about it, because 4.0 we've been waiting a long freaking time, man. Lief, thank you so much for joining me for this talk. This was a good one.
Hey,
thank you for approaching with the topic itself.
Yeah, I think it was a good one because it was a scary one, right? It's always difficult to talk about. I never like to be negative, but there obviously are thoughts that everyone has in this point in development, and I thought it was a good point to bring it forward, put ourselves in a spot that might be a little bit uncomfortable, and discuss it. Because I think overall we still have a positive outlook on everything, and I just wanted to get it out there. So thank you for having me to be able to have a platform to speak with someone on it. I enjoy it. I could talk to you about this stuff for another 5 hours,
dude,
if I had to. So I appreciate having me.
The main thing about this show is we want some nuance, man. It's never 100 or not, right? This podcast is going to be about, are they taking the sim out of Space Sim? A little bit, yeah. Like it's never. There's nuance, right? There's there's wiggle room. There's space to change opinions. And this is a conversation. It's hard to have conversations about the design philosophy and the game design overall because the examples you have to pull from are scattered and the reasons they come up are different and the way people feel are also different. So like we missed stuff in this episode. I would love to see in the comments what people feel in terms of this, the more complexity of the game that's coming in or the more arcadeifying that's going on or whatever you even define it as, because we missed stuff. No doubt. But I think this is a great talk and a good chance to at least start the conversation about where the game is headed overall and in a big way. So before you go, man, let the folks know where they can find the content that you're making for the game and even your esports stuff, if you'd like.
Oh, sure. I mean, if anyone's interested in Rocket League, in a couple of weeks, we do have the London Major coming up. I mean, that's just on the Rocket League Twitch channel. And then we got Worlds in Texas in September. But for my own stuff, is just LiefX everywhere. My YouTube
LiefX.
Life. Oh my God. LiefX. My brand, man, what have I done with this? Anyways, LiefX everywhere. I've got my Rocket League podcast, but I also, my main channel focuses, I'll be doing other games, but it's mostly Star Citizen stuff. So maybe there's some interest for people there. And same with Twitch and all that too. So if you want to check it out, go for it.
Cool, dude. Looking forward to it. Well, thanks again for joining me for this one. I'm looking forward to whatever happens with this update, and we'll definitely be in touch. We'll be talking about how it's all going. Until next time, folks, thank you so much for joining me. Of course, we've got the audio platforms with no ads if you want that. YouTube, you guys are great. And if you'd like to support the podcast, not only does it keep us doing the podcast, you can come and check these podcasts out live, listen to our gossip before and after. We had some good talk today. You get exclusive videos every month. Actually, my next exclusive video is about this very topic. So if you like this one, check that out. And you also can get your referral code in our referral code randomizer on all our videos. So instead of me getting referral codes from people jumping into my YouTube channel, they go to you. And some people are getting some nice rewards for that. So thank you again for your support. Thank you for coming to listen to the podcast. If you enjoyed it, maybe subscribe, and I'll see you next week.